Hello, this is the Wizard's Respite, the show that we talk about all things TTRPG. I'm Ash, and as always, I'm here with my partner, Zachariah from Old Man Gaming. Zach, how are you doing? New year.
Hi, Wiz. New Year. We're back from the holidays, man. It's exciting.
We survived it somehow.
Yeah, every year I get a little bit closer to not surviving it. Crawl through it, hands and knees just coming out, dirt on me. Yeah.
Yeah, that's definitely been this year. I don't know if you can hear it in my voice. I still have a little bit of a crack from getting sick. The holidays
Oh,
took it out of me so badly it hit my immune system.
that's the worst. That's the worst when you get sick around this time, too. I will say this. Sometimes I do hope for sickness just because of all the places you have to visit. So you could just say, I'm sick. I'm going back to bed. You guys wake me when the holidays are over. But yeah, holidays are over. And I do want to, before we get into the crux of the show, I just want to say thanks to Philbilly330 who commented on our last episode, which was gaming resolutions. And he has informed me that this is his favorite show that we do. So I got to read out his comment. Very good, entertaining show, guys. My New Year's TTRPG resolutions. 1. I would love to GM a game, but honestly, not sure if I have it. Tried a few times, and frankly, I just suck at it. Number 2. I want to complete my single mod story setting, which is a post-apocalyptic fantasy world, and then convince Wiz or Zach to GM and run a show of it. Laugh out loud. And finally, I also, as a player, want to make a charismatic, swarmy character at some point, which I've never done because it is so far away from my personality. But I think my role-playing skills have grown enough that I think I can pull it off. Good show, guys. Thanks. And I just want to weigh in about our TMNT versus Astral Drive difference. Phil Billy is on both shows here at the channel. Totally agree with you guys that TMNT is fun and carefree, and I really, really like that campaign, but I'm on the other side. I love the darker grittiness of Astral Drive because it forces a more cerebral mindset for me as a player, and I can feel my character, parentheses, Nullus, evolving and growing as as a character with every session. I love it. So thank you, Phil Billy, for the comment. What do you think about that, Wiz?
That's awesome, man. Super glad to hear Phil Billy's New Year's resolutions as a gamer. I think he's not giving himself enough
I
credit as
think
far
so.
as a GM. I think he would be a great GM. He thinks he sucks at it. I'm pretty sure we all think we suck at it at one point, especially at the beginning. There were so many times when, I jumped back into the GM seat as an adult. I'm a grown man now trying to do this with other grown people, and
Mm-hmm.
my wife's there,
Mm-hmm.
and at the end of the game, I'm like, oh, that was so bad. And she was just like, no, it was awesome. Phil, I think you'd be I think you're your own worst critic there. I would love to play a game as under you as the GM, and I also would love to. I mean, you finished that single mod expansion, and
Yeah, we'll
I
play
would
it.
be happy to GM that, man. That sounds awesome.
I am
Post-apocalyptic fantasy, shit.
I am gonna say this. First of all, every good GM is just an okay con artist. That's all. That's all they are. So that's it. I will say this as well. I have been present for some of Phil's attempts at game mastering. They have not been bad. I think that he has been limited by by some of the players and some of the situations that he was in at the time. Not to speak too heavily about it, but I think that if Phil Billy stepped to GM with us on the channel with you and me and maybe Jackie or Brian, I think that he would do just fine. I think it would be a
Oh yeah.
great session. I think it comes a lot more from Phil. I'm telling you, I think it comes a little bit more from your situation in your previous attempts to Game Master. I also did comment on this and said that like we've added all this to the task list for the future. so we will get to all of these things eventually. Eventually we will get to all of these things. Yeah.
Awesome. Well, it's a good start to the new year then, for the show, to get so much, positivity and energy going.
Yes.
And so from there, should we jump into the
let's do it.
Subject of today's show?
I'm just gonna put up my. You're gonna have to check this out, Wiz, because Wiz can't see me, guys. It's just I'm not. Along with every good GM is an okay con artist, every YouTube content creator is a con artist, and I don't really know how to work any of the technology I use. I just fumble through it. But you can see this. I created this. I'm very happy with this because this is an itch game that we're doing today. So, Wiz, let me just describe this to you. I printed it all off because I hate reading on the internet. It just drives me nuts. Or on my phone. So, like, I printed the whole thing off. I got some plastic sheaths and a 3-ring binder. And I taped the cover and the back cover to the 3-ring binder, and then just put it in 3-ring sheets. So I actually have a copy of the game.
Oh, dope! That is dope.
Yes, it's height of nerdiness right there. I showed my wife it, and I was like, I'm super proud of this. I know it's nerdy, and she's like, yeah, that's pretty nerdy, and I'm glad you're happy with it. And I'm like, thank you for faking it. I appreciate it. But yeah, we're doing Mutants in the Now today because guess what? I actually accomplished one of my resolutions. I got Mutants in the Now. Huzzah!
That's awesome. Good start.
I think one of the cool things we should do at the end of the year, for our New Year's resolution show from here on out, is to check back and see how many we've accomplished over the course of the year.
Ooh. That's a good one.
Yeah.
That's a good one.
The minute I got this, I was like, we should go back and like see how many we checked off.
Got to toe the line right there. Yeah, I'm actually kind of jealous. I've been reading this on my little tablet deal, and it's fine to do that, but it's small text.
Yes. Yeah.
Or a small screen. So. Yeah, playing around with the size of the page would definitely help, and actually printing that thing off, that's not too bad. That must have been, that's 130 pages.
My wife works for a title company. She has a printer. It's like, yay, printer paid for by other company. Otherwise, it was. What's funny is I made her print this off. Well, I didn't make her, I asked her to, but it was like a 144-page thing. And she brought it home, and I didn't want to ask her to print more off, but she only brought home one copy of the character sheet. And I want to pitch this as a garage game in the future. The garage game being my impersonal game with other players.
Right.
And it's the first thing they do when I step through the door with a game. Because I've gotten to play Game Master once or twice with them, and they'll be like, "Where's the character sheet?" Like, if you're not bringing character sheets, get the fuck out. And I'm like, God, back in my day, we just did it with notebooks, you know, period. But like, yeah, so I took it to FedEx. It cost $13 to get them copies. I was like, okay, never again. Melissa's like, just ask me. And I was like, Will, I'm sorry. Just didn't want to make you do more copies.
Yeah, like, to that note, to be fair also here, Zach, back in our day, when I was playing this, my printer, the printer we had in our house, had the ribbons up the side of the printer.
Oh, no.
Where you loaded it in and it all folded out.
The ones with the noises like that. Yeah. The ones that sound like a Dalek yelling at you. Yeah.
It wouldn't have been worth it to try and print off a player sheet.
Do you remember taking it to the library? There was always a library, and you have to huff your, like, it's like, oh, I need character sheets, so I need to or sometimes supermarkets would have, like your local, like, Giant Eagle or whatever. Well, you wouldn't know a Giant Eagle because we're in a different state, but, like your supermarket would have, like, a printer, and it would be, like, 5 cents a copy or whatever. I remember doing that when I'd have money, like, lugging the book to like the local library and printing off copies that way.
Put it on the big old copy machine, fold it
Yes.
open, push it
Yes.
down a little bit.
And it was the shame because back then, again, pointing this out, guys, we grew up when it wasn't cool to do this stuff. So
know,
you'd have to lug your nerd book into a public place and like hold up a line while you're printing off nerd documents and just everybody's looking at you like, I have to print off my taxes. Would you get your story crap out of here? You know?
The aged librarians looking at side-eyeing you the entire time, silently judging you. Because
Right?
that's what librarians did.
They did. They did.
Maybe they're nicer now, but in my day, I felt very judged.
Yes, every librarian judged me, especially my school librarian, because I would play these games through like the old school like message board games that you get to play. So I would set all the nerds in our school would set them up, and then that's what we would do during library time. We would just go on and check our message boards for nerd stuff. All right, well, we have digressed already. New year, new digression. So we're talking about this game today. And I was very excited about this game because, okay, so I've been trying to purchase more games off itch because I love itch. I think the game, the quality of games there is really interesting. They're very diverse, and I want to push itch a lot more than drive-thru. So I'm looking at more games off itch. I have a wish list that I want to get games for. This was one of them. It was, I think it was on sale for like $14 when I got it. It was my Christmas present to myself. And one of the big reasons I was looking at it is I was looking, and in this way it kind of failed me, is I was looking for a simpler way to play Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles because anybody who watches our Stump Game stream, the game is really fun. It's really fun. The problem is, it was made in the 80s, and it is definitely rough at times. It's very easy for people to not understand what their bonuses are because you have to look in like 13 different places to not understand. You know what I mean? The rules are very crunchy. They're very crunchy. And it's very easy to miss things or mark something down and forget you marked it down or what that is and then not factor it in. Philbillies even have that problems, and he's an experienced player with us, you know.
And that's kind of Philbilly's jam.
It's crunch. And this game has so much crunch that it's easy to kind of get lost in it. So my goal was to find a game that like had the same feel of TMNT and Other Strangeness without being TMNT and Other Strangeness. I failed that. This thing has so much goddamn crunch, Wiz. It is crunchy, 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 crunchy. That being said, I'm excited to talk about it because it has... Whoever did this was definitely like a super big fan of TMNT and Other Strangeness. They saw the problems that TMNT and Other Strangeness has. And while this is very crunchy, in a lot of ways it's almost one-for-one compatible with the original TMNT and Other Strangeness.
Yeah.
And it fixes a lot of the problems that I jury-rigged. If you watch our stream, I had a control that I jury-rigged. I had to jury-rig in the advancement system in a weird way. This kind of fixes all of those issues, which I thought was interesting.
And so to your point on the crunchiness.
Mm-hmm.
So this is a crunchier, like it is on par with the crunchy aspect if you're looking at sheer numbers aspect of the original Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, Other Strangeness from the 80s, classic crunchy as hell 80s game.
Mm-hmm.
It's on par with it. I would, looking at this, so when I first read even the first few pages, the thing that really got me down, or my big critique of TMNG and Other Strangeness, was how it was written.
Yes.
And this is so clean. Mutants in the Now fixed my biggest problem with TMNT, because I don't really mind crunchiness. Like I like There's a certain
You're a
aspect of
D&D
correctness I
guy.
really enjoy.
You
I don't
gotta
need
like
it.
Crunchy if you're a D&D guy.
Right, exactly. You do. You do. And I am. And so um but the thing that killed me, man, like that book was written hard. It was
Hmm.
hard to read. It was hard to get through. Um I feel like the guy that wrote this felt the exact same way
Yep.
and was like, I'm fixing that right now. I
Yep.
am fixing how this book is written. I am rewriting it so it is easy to read.
Yeah. Yeah, I 100% agree. I'm glad we started in this place because there's a lot of things I want to talk about in this game that this game does differently. It's really cool. But yeah, the writer of this definitely was like, I love this game. I hate the way it's written. I'm going to streamline it, but I'm going to keep it basically the same. So like, I'll say it. In some ways, Mutants in the Now is crunchier than TMNT. If I'm making a full character, not an NPC character, in Mutants in the Now, it takes me twice as long as making a character in Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles and Other Strangeness. It's a very crunchy process. That being said, it's also because it covers everything. So there's no question. There's a reason that the character sheet is 5 pages, because everything on that character sheet is everything you're ever going to need to know ever about your character. And like that's something that I really enjoy about it. There's how many times have we had to stop play in TMNT and go, what's our bonus? What's that person's bonus?
Yeah.
What are we using? What are we doing? Whereas with Mutants in the Now, it is all very like it is answered on that character sheet. Just flip through till you find the right thing, and it's there. And I think that like it takes a really long time to get that character sheet done. And
Right.
I think that like, but yeah, it's streamlined. It's streamlined. It fixes a lot of the issues. There's definitely some things I don't like about it compared to TMNT, which I'm sure we'll discuss. But yeah, on the writing, it is written so much cleaner. It's so easy to read, and it goes. It's one thing I also like about it is whenever I write a game, like single mod, I try and write the game in the order in which I would be doing the things in the game. So I start with an introduction, then I start with character creation. Then I go from character creation into like character customization. Then I go from character customization to the basic play, the basic idea of the dice, then combat, then equipment, well, then advancement, then equipment, then anything else. That's how this is written. Combat is like the 8th chapter or something, which is great. You have an understanding. By the time you get to combat, you're like, I know how this is gonna work. Like you're
Right.
like it's you've gotten through it all, and I really appreciate the way that this book is written. Very cleanly, very straightforward, and very through. You know.
For sure. And like, one thing I want to point out is that to give some grace to the past,
Mm-hmm.
TMNT came out in what? 84, I think.
Oh, I will look it up, but I believe it's 84.
It was early mid 80s,
Yes.
I believe.
Keep talking.
And it was
85. 85. You're
85.
One
Okay.
year away.
It was a powerhouse when it came out, but we got to recognize that was kind of the pioneer times
Of gaming. Yeah.
TTRPG.
Yeah.
They haven't been around for that long. People hadn't been tinkering and thinking about this since they were, we've been thinking about this stuff since we were 12.
Yes.
The men that were making this were like, hey, this is kind of fun and cool. We kind of played this a little, something like this when we were kids, but we're doing our own thing now. And so it was the beginning. It was, the old school DOS version of these types of games,
Yeah.
And this is kind of the natural progression. This is the child of that game.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's 100% right. I mean, they didn't, when they were inventing TMNT and even D&D and all those old school ones, they didn't have, there was no reference. It was just like, this is what we're trying to do. Let's do it, And I think that like now you have that where they can look at it and go, this is what that game was. This is what was wrong about it. We can move on with it,
Exactly.
Yeah, where do you want to move to next? Because I definitely want to get into some of the crunchiness of this game.
I think the thing that makes the most sense is to go into character creation.
Okay.
Probably kind of just go through it exactly the way that you just described, is step by step through like
Well,
various aspects.
and there's no way we're going to be able to get into everything because this is a big meaty book, but
Right.
it is very similar to Turtles, but expounded. One thing I really enjoy right off the bat is there are way more animals in this book. Way more animals. Like, comparatively, I think there's something like 50 to 60 more animals that you could potentially end up being. They even have certain animals that have, like, different breeds of animal and how those powers. Plus, the powers are much more concise. They also account for everything that goes into an animal, not just a couple of things, you know.
Right.
One of the things I found really interesting is you have to spend goop to actually change your diet as an animal in this game, which is, again, a little bit more crunchy than your original Turtles. In Turtles, you're only worrying about like whether you have thumbs, whether you walk upright, whether you could talk, or what you look like. In this, you also have to worry about like what do you eat, like what do you breathe, like stuff like that. And what's interesting is if you start as an animal that's like aquatic, you have to make sure you allocate those goops so that you can be on land and be walking around. I think that's really interesting. Goop being their ooze or their bio-E
Right.
points.
And for those who aren't super familiar with the TMNT original game, it's a really cool mechanic. We talked about it in the past on our show that was dedicated to how the TMNT game worked. It's a cool mechanic for character creation where you take an animal and you have a certain amount of points that, in this case it's goop for this game, that you use to evolve that and mutate that animal into mutant fighting ninja creature or whatever kind of mutant you want to be.
What's really funny too is I think when we were doing the turtle one, you had pointed out that your kind of in your head canon, it was like how much you were exposed to the ooze is how much bioenergy you had, and that's why it made more sense that if you were smaller, you would be exposed more to bio-E than like if you were larger. That's actually the mechanic in this. Like that's how the person definitely looked at the other one and wrote it. They even say like the mechanic of how much you're exposed to is how much goop you have. Again, same thing with size level and stuff. One thing I really also enjoyed is they have you do 4d6 for all your main stats, so random roll, but you get a certain number of takebacks depending on whether you're going to be going in as a group or as a solo character. And then those takebacks allow you to re-roll your stats if you don't like the rolls. But one thing that I thought was cool is you can actually save them and re-roll origin rolls too, because everything's random. It's all about the random, just like old TMNT. And that's a really cool aspect of the character creation that I thought was cool as well.
And I think that is actually like a perfect look at the old school games from the 80s and the new games that are out today. Because that kind of rough, hardcore, like you roll your character, you live with your character, very prevalent back in the day. Today, there's a lot more leaning towards flexibility on that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
And instead of just saying, okay, you can just pick your character and roll your attributes and whatever, this gives you a built-in mechanic for adjustment, which is more consistent with this gameplay styles that we see today.
Yeah. Another thing that I really like about the animal stuff that they do is they have way more animal traits and way more things that functionally change the game. I felt like in Turtles, as much as I love it, like I said, there's a lot of times where you'd roll an animal and there was just nothing to that animal. They didn't have any powers. It was just, this is the animal you are. Whereas in this game, every animal has something to it, like some sort of weird, cool thing. We were, when I did take it to the garage game just to show everybody was randomly rolling up their animals just to like see what they'd get. One of the guys rolled up a hamster, and you'd think the hamster sucked. Hamster has a unique ability that's basically like a bag of holding in their mouth. which
Yes.
is cool as hell. It's cool as hell. Somebody rolled up a turkey, and the turkey had an ability that was like, it was like Sonic because of the gobble or something like that. There
Oh,
was a
that's awesome.
cockroach that's basically unkillable. I think that like stuff like that's really cool. They have a lot of just powers and abilities to attach to your animals in this, so that you never really feel like you got a bum rap. That's one of the cool things is a lot of people rolled like really weird animals, and at first you could see they were like, oh, I rolled that, and then when I would read off what they would get from it, they were like, that's cool, I could work with that. I have one guy got a golden retriever. It's like, I don't want a golden retriever. And then I read off that like you basically have charisma powers over people because you're cute. And like that
Yeah.
right there was like, oh, he's like, oh, I could work with that. And I feel like that's really cool,
That is cool, and what I could be wrong, but in the mindset of a creator, I feel like the person wrote out an animal, had a couple of boxes underneath it, and said, "I'm filling these boxes with animal traits that are useful and cool.
Yeah.
Period. It's gonna get done,
Yeah.
no matter what." And he wouldn't let it go
Yeah,
unless
without a
he
doubt.
filled those boxes.
Without a
When that
doubt.
didn't necessarily happen with the TMNT. There were some cool animal traits, but not every single person.
No.
You didn't necessarily want every single animal.
You could, and there was certain animals that didn't always make sense to me too. There was some animals where it was like, this animal would have this and it didn't have it, and then other animal
Yeah.
like what is it, like octopi can regenerate? Can't they regenerate their tentacles? I thought, or something like that. But either way, they can like flexibly push themselves through places that they couldn't push themselves through. There's videos all over the internet of that. There's nothing like that in TMNT, whereas this has it. I think that like, it's really cool, and to just continue with that, the way they do the skills is so much better. So TMNT, you had skills, and all of them were grumped together. Weapon proficiencies, combat styles, and skills. They were all grouped together. So you could take a skill, and that skill would just give you one-time bonuses. There was no percentage to it, whereas other skills were percentages for rolls that you needed. This game, the skills have percentages, period. You get to pick a fighting style. The fighting style is how you level up. It has a ton of different fighting styles in here, each with their own abilities and powers of how you manipulate combat, which I thought was really cool. And then proficiencies is a whole different thing. So like, and even better, the percentage is not based on what the skill, because in TMNT it's like arbitrary. Like if you take Prowl at level 1, it's 65%, period, or 45% or something like that. With this game, it's based on the skills or the stats that come off of it, and that was something that was huge to me, because in TMNT the stats, there are a lot of stats where you're like, oh, this is going to matter, and then it doesn't matter that much. You look at like intelligence. Like I added the control modifier when we're playing TMNT online, but intelligence doesn't really do anything. It gives you a little percentage bump to your skills, and after that there's no use for it whatsoever. Whereas with this game, every stat correlates to your skills in some way, shape, or form, and gives you certain bonuses, to the point where there's much better synergy with that than the TMNT had,
Yeah, and that helps lean in, I think, to two really important aspects of this type of game. The first being able to build a dynamic group environment, which I think this game actually works really well for.
Yeah.
Some of the character creation in the beginning actually even has rules. If you're think about the type of group and party you're building, and plan out, your strategy as when you're rolling these characters up, how to balance your characters out with each other. So everybody has a role, everybody has something they're good at. And because you're going to have some things that you're maybe not so good at. But that makes it a little bit easier, because not everybody, some people might have like really high intelligence, and that plays really well into that party member.
Yep.
Whereas that isn't necessarily going to be the case if, intelligence really doesn't do anything that much in standard gameplay, like it did in the 80s TMNT version.
Yeah, and you can have that dynamic. I think you can also play it by yourself. There's also rules for acquiring skills that you don't necessarily have, which really wasn't there in TMNT. But the character creation right off the bat is like, are you going to be a character by yourself? Are you going to be a character in a group, but you have a lot of different animals, or are you like a straight up family of animals like TMNT was? And there are different character creation rules for all of those, depending on the take back thing, which we had talked about in the beginning, because depending on which one of those you pick is how much take backs you get. And in certain ones, you have to kind of share the take backs between the group, which right off the bat kind of like pushes that that teamwork mentality.
Right.
I really want to talk about the dice rolling mechanics in this now, if that's all right with you.
Yeah, let's jump into it.
Okay, the coolest thing this game does, in my opinion, hands down, bar none, is how they do criticals and advantages in this game. I think that it relies on it. It relies on advantage, disadvantage, and you're probably wondering, how do you do this? Because again, this is like TMNT. You have a percentage for your skills. You're trying to roll under that percentage on percentile dice for most of your non-combat rolls. Your combat rolls are a d20. You're rolling a d20 to try and hit things, right? And then there are damage dice that you use for weapons and whatnot. The damage dice is something we'll talk about in a little bit, but the way they do crits is so cool. And advantages. So you can have advantage, which is 2d20s, take the best. You can also have disadvantage, which is 2d20s, take the worst. Just like normal D&D. The way they do disadvantage and advantage in percentile dice is, if you have advantage in the roll, you get to pick the lower number as your 10 spot. If you have disadvantage, you have to take the higher number as your 10 spots. And then you're wondering, how do you do crits there? Because a 0-1 is almost never going to happen. It's not a 0-1, it's doubles. You roll a 55, a 45, but you pass, but with doubles. That's so cool. That is just so fucking cool. I love when somebody uses dice and manipulates them in a new and different way, and I've never seen a game do percentiles like this. I'm not saying they're not out there. It's just, for me, in my experience with games, I have never seen a game do percentile dice with advantages and disadvantages in such a cool, sleek way.
And let's look at that for a second here, because if you think about it, if it's doubles, then you generally are going to have basically a 10% chance of hitting a crit.
Yeah.
Getting it like the crit. Because there's going to essentially be
probably a little bit less, but yeah.
Yeah, I guess it would
in that vein, because you're never gonna have 100% to pass. So like, if you're only rolling a 45%, if you're only trying to roll under a 45%, it's gonna be a lot lower because you only have 3 shots at your doubles. You know.
Yeah. Yeah, that's right.
But still, I see what you're saying. Like, you're still right around on par with the D20. You know.
Yeah.
And rolling that 20.
It's a good use of D10s and percentile dice, which, you know, there aren't that many games that use percentile dice, which I think is a little bit of a shame.
Yeah.
Percentile, like, everybody understands 1 through 100%. It's a really easy way to expand upon everything.
Yeah.
Because it's just, what are your chances out of 100%? What are your chances of doing whatever? And I'm really glad that they didn't get rid of that in this edition, or in this version of this mutation centric game. And yeah, it's a cool use, cool keeping it in, and I really like that a lot.
Yeah, I think so. I also just love the way they do advantage, because they kept referring to advantage and disadvantage. I'm like, how the hell are they going to do advantage and disadvantage when 90% of the rolls are going to be percentile? And then that flip the dice thing is just like, that's awesome. That's freaking awesome. And it even carries into character creation too, because like you can like take like the higher or lower result of other certain things when you're creating your character in that way. And I don't know, I just love the way they did the way they do the percentile. It's real sleek. It's real straightforward. It's just so the way they do the rolling is just so good.
Yeah, I agree. Let's see. So we talked about creating our mutation, the huge animal guide, the number of qualities that these creatures have. Is there anything else that really stood out to you that you really liked?
I have some nitpicks, but as far as really likes, I do like the way they do. I both like and dislike how they do damage. And how they do damage and how they do stuff, because again they're kind of trying to take the bonuses out. So every stat you have in this game has just a flat, like I think it's something like +1 to +5, and when you're attacking, depending on your attack, you're adding 2 of those stats together, and then that's that. It's d20 plus that number, period. So in a lot of ways, they take out all those weird pluses. We discussed that earlier in the show. TMNT has a lot of, like, this guy has a +8 here, but a +7 here, but a +6 here, depending on what's happening. Like, he's got a +9 to strike with a weapon, but he's got a +8 to strike with his hands, but he's got a +2 to strike with this, and that gets really complicated and convoluted and hard to keep track of in the moment. The mutants in the now, they take that out, and they do that with damage, too. How it works is you have a damage dice from your strength, based on whatever your strength is. You have a damage dice from your size, whatever your size is. And then you have a damage dice from your weapon, whatever your weapon is. If you're talking about close combat. And then, so if you hit, you roll those 3 dice, So, like, good example would be... I gotta find the charts here.
And that's a lot of dice to be, playing with. And to be honest, I mean, like, it's not hard to read dice. It is hard to add up a bunch of shit on the fly.
It is.
And so, like, when you're rolling a bunch of dice and you just, like, look at those numbers real quick, you can pop that off together. It keeps gameplay moving real quick.
Yeah.
Also, everybody loves rolling dice.
Right.
That's one of the reasons why we play this game.
Yeah. So your average, like, 14, I would say. You got a D10 from strength. Then your average weight would be, well, not your average weight, your average size level would be around like a 7 or an 8. That gives you a, sorry about that. That gives you a D8. Oh, I'm sorry, a D6. And then depending on your weapon, you're going to get a D something, 4 through 12. And then you roll them all together to do your damage. I think that's really cool. They also have some really cool resistances with that.
The resistance is one of the things I liked about this quite a bit.
I really like the resistance. So, like, if you usually have a resistance between 1 and 3, and then depending on whatever that is, if a die on damage rolls under that, it doesn't deal damage. So if you've got 3d6 and you roll 3 3s, and the person you're attacking has a resistance of 3, they take no damage, which I think is a really cool way of doing that. The only thing... The nitpicky thing I think about, they have an AC. And I think it's just so boring to not let the person who's defending roll. I think it's just so much more ramp in tension. It makes you feel that defense, so to speak. But with this, it's like 10 plus 2 of your bonus scores, and that's your number to hit. And if somebody rolls under that with their roll, they hit you. And, I mean, it's not necessarily unbalanced because you have a lot of damage. You have the shit score, which I know what they were doing there. They had, like, I don't know what it's like. They looked. It's like they looked at PP and they're like, "Well, we got to have some sort of score that means something."
When I read that, the first thing that popped in my head was you making that joke every time you talk about physical prowess.
Physical prowess, yeah, PP, the PP,
and it was like, oh, you mother.
Yeah, I saw it. I was like, seriously? Because it's not even the same score. It's instead of SDC, it's structural harm that's temporary or something like that.
The threshold. Structural. I'm reading it right
threshold.
here. Like, structural harm threshold.
Or SHT. Shit, you guys, ridiculous. But that's your kind of SDC, and you get a lot of that. You get a lot of hit points. You have a lot of damage to soak up. Like, they're going to be throwing big bombs at you before you die. It's just, I feel like you get into that zone of trading punches, which I hate. But I think it's balanced a little bit with all the moves that you can do. Like, depending on your style, there's so many different ways to fight. There's counter punchers, there's counters, there's all sorts of different, like, if you get into the combat, there's so many different types of moves and actions that you can do in combat, depending on what your fighting style is, that it kind of fixes that a little bit, you know?
Yeah, that helps out. The resistance aspect, that definitely adds a lot of dynamics to a fight. Because if your character per se is fighting somebody who has a resistance, then that's when you kind of strategize a little bit in the moment in role play with your other players, like, hey, you know, like, my sword's not hitting it, why don't you come over here with your bow staff and knock it out?
Right. Yeah, I do also think what's weird about this one, and it'll take play to really find out, I feel like physical combat is actually a little bit more severe in this one than ranged combat, which is,
I can see that,
which is weird. I mean, and in a lot of ways that's how I do my games. You know, like, it's harder to like, even though you think of getting shot, you're dead, you know, that sort of thing.
Yeah.
But, like, the balancing act of it, you know, like I am more likely to survive one person shooting me once with a low caliber bullet than somebody hitting me with a sword. You know, like
right.
So that's how I kind of try and think about it. Even though, like, I mean, you're probably going to be dead in both cases, but if somebody shoots you, and you don't, it's a smaller thing. It does a ton of damage to you internally, but, like, if somebody hits you with a sword, you're fucking done.
Yeah.
So, like, that's kind of how I try and do stuff there too. So I don't necessarily hate that. I just want to see how that's played. The other thing is, too, I've read it 3 times, and I feel like movement's broken, but I also feel like I don't understand it right away, because, like, there's a whole aspect where they're like, you can move 75 feet in a round, and I'm like, that's too much feet. I gotta be reading this wrong. So, like, I gotta go back through that and reread it. But overall, like, my biggest complaint, and it's funny because in the garage game, another guy who plays with us, I straight up told him, I was like, there's a thing in that game you're going to hate. And he's like, what is it? And I'm like, I'm not telling you, because I want you to vote for it. He's probably going to listen to this and know now, but he hates AC2. He likes the dodge roll. And I'm with him on that. I'm with him on that because you want to ramp up that feel of an actual fight. You know what I mean? And
sure.
And the dice rolls are your actions, like your physical actions. That's how you, the person, is reacting without actually punching or dodging somebody. At the core essence of things, it's one of the biggest problems I have with D&D is because it doesn't feel like that sword fight, because it feels like I'm hitting you with a sword. I did this much damage. You're hitting me with a sword.
Yeah.
I did this much damage. I'm hitting you with a sword.
Blank you have to fill in there.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Like, with your imagination,
right.
without ever saying it, without it being part of the
right.
game. There's a
right.
blank of, like, swing. Now I have to imagine what it looks like when
right.
I miss, as opposed to them rolling and being like, caught it on the sword, you know,
right.
or whatnot.
Well, and the thing is, too, I mean, some of this is game mastering and playing stuff. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So some of this is on them. I'm not going to say it's not. But if you want to prime somebody's imagination, key them to it. You know what I mean? You're not connected to an AC. You're not connected to the protection score from this game. You're not connected to just a score that's there that they failed to beat. You're connected to an action you have to do. It's kind of like a very mental, like you have to force the person, like, I'm not saying that somebody shouldn't be taking an AC and filling in the, like, this is how I defended, this is how I dodged. I'm just saying it is going to be easier for that person to think of it that way if they have to actually do something, if they have to participate in the role, in the activity. And that's something that, like, it's one of the reasons that I've just always thought, like, roll versus roll is superior to on AC or a defense rating or something like that is it's just it primes that imagination to feel the moment and do something with it, you know?
I do. I do. I definitely see what you're saying. It definitely makes sense to me. I do see both sides of it, to be
Yeah.
honest with you.
I mean, I could
Because the other
argue
side of
against
it is
myself. Yeah.
it does having AC does streamline the speed.
Yep.
You
Yepers.
can pop a lot between players, particularly when you're not dealing. You can also like get through and end in death a bit faster when
Yeah.
it's an AC situation, because there's less chance of somebody just getting a hot streak, the GM getting a hot streak, and blocking every single hit
Yeah.
that they're throwing at you.
I completely
So
concur with that.
there's
Yeah, there's good and bad. I completely concur about that. I could have immediately argued that against myself. I think that, especially with games like this and D&D, where it's extremely crunchy, so you've got a lot of other mechanics that you're already going to be thinking about. It makes that roll so much faster to move to the next thing. So I get that. You want a more streamlined process on a game with so much that you've got to think about, At the same time, my reasoning for it is the whole, like, priming your brain to it, But, again, the other thing is, too, my system is a lot simpler than this system in D&D. It's much more simpler and easy to process, so it doesn't need that streamlining. So, like, I kind of get it on both ends,
Yeah. There's a lot that goes into game design.
Yeah.
Because
Yeah.
I mean, like, it really is. It's not an easy thing to do to make these things. But
No.
you're absolutely like in single mod, there is that balance of both people rolling, but at the same time, the modifiers are so straightforward, so simple, so quick, and the combat is so quick. It doesn't
Yeah.
matter. You're still gonna end in death quickly.
Yeah.
You're
Yeah.
not holding up you're not having like a 2-session long battle
Right.
between two guys.
Right. Yeah, I will agree. I mean, there have been some single mod off-camera fights that lasted way longer than they should have. There's one guy that I played with in the garage game, because we play a John Wick game. Every gunfight this guy is in, it is like 2.5 hours. No joke. It is just constant. Like, I don't know what his problem is. He cannot hit. They can't hit him, and it's just this constant. It's like, at first it's cool because nobody's hitting, and you're like, this is a John Wick fight, and then 10 years and you're like, yeah, he blocks the gun and it shoots up, and then you block the gun and it shoots up. It's ridiculous. I don't know what it is, but yeah, he cannot have a fast fight and get it done to save his life. But yeah, I mean, overall.
Yeah. All right, should we start getting into the nitpicks?
Yeah, let's do it. I mean, you've heard a couple of mine already.
Yeah. Let's see. Nitpicks? Okay, well, this is a minor nitpick of mine. It's not as big of a deal. It doesn't even have to do with really the gameplay as much as anything else. In the original game, that this is very clearly a love letter to, a very, very well crafted. My big issue was the readability. That was the biggest thing that killed me about Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles.
Yeah.
The TTRPG. It was the readability of this thing, being able to go through it and jump back and forth. They fixed that. 100%. They fixed that here.
Yeah.
But I have old man eyes, and the print on this thing.
It's rough.
Oh, it's tiny.
It's rough.
It is tiny, and so this is like an aesthetic nitpick. The most minor of nitpicks I can give is an aesthetic nitpick. It's not that big of a deal. It's not going to impact gameplay. My first nitpick, though, is just reading through it. It makes me tired because my eye strain is a little bit higher than I feel like it needs to be.
Yeah, I agree with that. It's on white. It's just straight typewriter type. And they have a lot of, like, weird, like, splash designs in the background that make it even harder, that kind of blend in with the writing. It is a very meaty 134 pages. There's a lot of words in there. And I think that, like, I could totally see that. I can totally see that issue with it. I would second it without question. Without question. My nitpicks. I mean, you've already heard my biggest ones, which is the AC, obviously. I would actually say that the advancement and the movement, they're the two things that I just cannot... I've read it 3 times, and I don't understand. Like, I mean, first of all, I love that their advancement has a system for getting new skills. Totally cool with that.
Right.
They also have rules for what you do when you're untrained in a skill. Great. Because you just roll it with disadvantage. Oh my god, genius, thank you. But
not that hard.
Not that hard.
Didn't do it, but they did it.
Yeah.
You know?
I'm not going to lie. Part of me wants to just do that in TMNT, aside from, like, the control. That's future us problems. But,
Right.
like, they have this weird, like, mark the skills system and spend your advancements on the marking system and what's marked and what's not. I feel like it's overcomplicated, and, like, I'm having a hard time wrapping my head around... I know I can advance in this game. I'm having a hard time wrapping my head around how I advance and what I advance at what time, you know? And that's a little frustrating to me. And, of course, the movement. They even say in the movement the very small movement section that movement isn't a prime concern for them in this game. That you should just be able to reach wherever you need to reach. But, like, that's fine. But I wrote up a character, and I'm pretty sure that character's move then is 75 feet in a round. There's a sprint action where I can double that. I don't know what game in the world would let me move 150 feet in a round. So, I mean, what about that Flash? Yeah.
Cheetah.
No, it was not. It was like, it was an orca. It's a killer whale character. Which, granted, he's bigger, so he's going to have a bigger stride now that I've given him legs. But, like, 150 feet? Are you fucking nuts? Like, I've read it 3 times. I'm like, this has to be wrong. But every time I read it, I'm like, this is the number that comes out. So, like, I've got to be missing something in there. If that's really the movement, I'm still blaming this on user error. But if that's really the amount of movement that they give you in that game, it's insane and asinine. It shouldn't be that way. It completely invalidates ranged characters in any way, shape, or form. It's like, it's so wrong with how good the rest of the game is, or at least how mechanically appropriate the rest of the game is, that, like, it's like glaring. It's glaring.
That honestly, that actually kind of leads really well into my actual nitpick of the actual mechanic thing that kind of was a little hard for me, and I got it, but I have to stop and really think about it every time I, like, read it and I read the rule that says it. It's this, and it's tied in. It's used in creating the speed, and it's this thing that they did where you roll your number, and then you roll your percentile, and then what was it, like, that's the percent doubled or increased. So basically, like, if you roll a 12, I think was the first example they showed of this, right? You roll a 12, and then you roll your percentile, and it's 100%. So then now it's 24, because you add 100%
right.
to that 12.
Right.
And I don't know, like,
every
time I read that through,
it
was like, okay, wait, what? I have to roll this? And I could just see myself as a GM trying to explain this to a brand new player to this system, and them just, like, glass.
Yeah. I mean, I really... There's much simpler ways to do those things, even in the confines of a very crunchy game, that I feel like... I really feel like advancement was just, like, they put like, dude, just level it, and you can level up 2 things, and you're done. I don't know why you're doing all these weird marking if you use it or you fail it thing. Like, there's a bunch of them. Like, there's a whole system for, like, if you fail a skill, you mark it, and then you have to pay for it before you pay other things, and it's just like... why? Just like give me advancements and call it a day, you know? It's very
Yeah.
confusing. Yeah, there's a couple of parts where it's like I almost felt like they went too far in the confusing way. Um, yeah. So that would be my nitpickiest.
Fortunately, for most of those things that I was confused for, wasn't for in situations of actual gameplay.
Yeah.
Leveling up typically takes place sort of outside of gameplay. Maybe at the beginning of a session, maybe at the end of a session, um, but it's not really in the middle of running around having an adventure.
Yeah.
So there is that saving grace to a certain degree.
I do want to just give two last shout outs before I know we're probably about ready to start wrapping this thing up. But two last shout outs to the system that I do enjoy over TMNT. It gives you rules for minions, which TMNT, that's one of the worst parts about TMNT is like every fight with anybody is an epic fight. Like even the Fez ninjas that I know you're going to beat is still like, it's a whole session, you know. This one has like, hey, these guys are nothing. This is how you beat them, you know, and they have rules for like knocking people out quickly without necessarily, while still using their stats to the fullest. They also have a good way, because one thing that while I was making a character in this, I was like, dude, NPCs for this is going to be a nightmare. I cannot consider making. And they have rules where it's like, all right, if you're a GM, this is how you make an NPC character. Don't worry about any of that shit. Here's what you need to have an NPC character. Just make it this way, and it'll be simple. And I was like, oh, okay, this is way cooler, way easier than like because the character creation is meaty thing. And I was just sitting there like, oh man, if I want to make legal created characters, this is gonna be hours and hours and hours and hours and hours of my time to make up bad guys. But they have a way to just like, yeah, you just need these two and these, and then you're good, you know. And I appreciated that.
Yeah, looking out for the GM there.
Yeah.
I got one shout out I want to throw out there for this. I loved TMNT. First time I played it was with you. The first time I read it was with you.
Mm-hmm.
And it brought me back to my childhood. It brought me back. I loved the Ninja Turtles when I was a kid.
Yeah.
I loved the IP. I love the nature of that game. When you read the book, it feels like the 80s. It's rough read, but it's still, there's just this style to it that I love that is recreated here.
Yes. Lovingly.
Lovingly, yeah. Well done. It's executed. This writer knew how to write this book. That really means a lot to me. Looking back at my childhood, and just it's an enjoyable. I maybe have to squint a little bit because I got old man eyes now, but it's an enjoyable experience. I'm smiling as I read this book because it feels like the 80s. They have these little segments in there at the very beginning. I don't know if you remember the little memo from the company that created the goop.
Oh no! Yeah, they do have a ton of stuff like that. Yeah, the flare, little flares. Yes.
Jokes thrown in for the fans. It's freaking awesome. I love it.
I will say this to the remaster, to the TMNT and Other Strangeness remaster Kickstarter that's already funded and coming. You need to read this book. You need to read this book before you remaster yours, because this is the way to write yours better. This is a remaster of TMNT and Other Strangeness, in my opinion, in a lot of ways. Yeah. So, obviously don't do the same thing, but you need to look at this book and be like, oh, use it as a template for how to write yours, you know? So I'm fingers crossed that they get it right this time.
Or at very least, hook up with this writer.
Yes.
He knows what he's doing.
Yeah.
He loves the IP. He knows
Julian K, because he put his name in big bold print right there on the... Julian K's Mutants in the Now. I should have done that on all my games.
Yeah.
Zachariah Van Slider's single mod. Ha ha! Yeah. So, all right. I think we're just about done here, man.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, one thing we should definitely mention before we wrap up the
Hmm.
Mutants in the Now review is that you and I are planning on doing a character creation session
Hmm.
here on Sanctorum, where we can kind of
It's the
break
first
through
time
some
we've
of
ever
this
done
stuff.
that.
Yeah.
I like this type of. We have a lot of different types of episodes here on the Sanctorum that I find. Like we've got the game reviews, like we just did. We started doing those. We've got other like TTRPG things that we've talked about, the specific topics. But I like the idea of like certain episodes just being like we take a system and we make characters in it on like screen live. You know.
Yeah. Show people what it is we're talking about as we create it.
Yeah, I think it would be really cool. This will be the first one of those. I think we could do that in other games too, in the future if people enjoy it. But yeah, I think then in 2 weeks you'll see our episode where we create characters in Mutants in the Now.
Yeah. Yeah. It's gonna be a lot of fun.
And then
All right.
if I might plug a little bit, if that's all right with you, at
Yes, of
some
course.
point in the near future, me and Wiz are gonna be back at the one shot action, and we're gonna play with those characters you see us create in Mutants in the Now, and we're gonna game master each other in 15-minute chunks. Back and forth. I'm really excited about that. On the TTRPG front, we also have just this week. We'll have, when you're watching this, it'll already be out. Astral Drive returned. TMNT and other the Stump Gang, TMNT and Other Strangeness, the Stump Gang returned. Both of those happened in the same week. Good God. Please check those out. And then I have, I want to say this right now, the Doctor Who, the second resolution. We are in the process of getting it done. We have I have already set the first recording. We have made characters. There's a session 0, not up for you guys to watch. This is just going to be between us. But we discussed the system. We discussed the setting. Everybody has created their proverbial characters. So that will be coming later this year. I'm hoping in a few months or so we'll be able to get through that.
Okay, perfect. And a few plugs on my end. Wizards Respite is a website where I write all things TTRPG. I will post all of these videos up there. You can see our back catalog up there. I also am posting some T-shirts with TTRPG themed graphics on it. Actually, this one you're gonna if you're on YouTube
Yeah,
and
you
you're
can go for
watching
it.
this, you can kind of see it a little bit there.
Right
It's backwards,
there.
of course. It
He's
does say imagination, but yes, TTRPG dice
modeling.
themed t-shirts, all things like that. I got a few more coming out pretty soon. And try and really knock out some, at least one new design every 2 weeks. Harder
Oh, that's
than it
cool.
sounds. We'll see how it goes.
Oh, that's cool. I love that, and I will be getting the T-shirts as soon as I get paid. At least one. I haven't purchased one yet, but I want to purchase one. I'm excited about that.
Well, thanks, man. Thank you.
Yeah,
we got it.
Yeah, we're done.
All right. Well, for everybody out there, keep rolling them dice.
Bye.